The champagne toast was already underway when Brandon Kellerman decided to fire me. We were on the rooftop terrace of the Piedmont Hotel, 200 people, string quartet. A banner that read, "Congratulations Brandon Chief Operating Officer." Brandon, the CEO's son, had just been promoted. He was 31, had an MBA from his father's alma mater, and had worked at Apex Manufacturing for all of 3 years. I was standing near the back with a glass of sparkling water when Brandon spotted me. He walked over, slightly drunk, supremely confident, with 2 of his fraternity brothers turned junior executives trailing behind. "Rebecca," he said loudly enough that people nearby turned to look. "I'm surprised you came. Congratulations on a promotion." "Yeah, thanks. Listen, with my new role, I'm restructuring some departments. And honestly, your position doesn't really fit where we're headed. So effective Monday, we're eliminating your role. HR will have the paperwork." His friends snickered. People were openly staring now. "You're firing me, at your promotion party?" "I'm letting you know the company is moving in a new direction. But yeah, if you want to be dramatic about it, sure. You're fired." I set down my glass, nodded slowly. "Okay, Brandon. Okay, that's it? That's it. Enjoy your party." I turned and walked toward the elevators. Behind me I could hear Brandon laughing. Heard someone say, "Dude, that was cold." What Brandon didn't know, what almost no one at that party knew, was that I didn't just work at Apex Manufacturing. I owned it, 61% of it to be exact. And Monday morning was going to be very interesting. Hey Tangled Yarns family, it's Brett. Welcome to what might be the most publicly satisfying firing reversal I have ever encountered. Today's story is about Rebecca Torres, a woman who helped build a manufacturing company from a garage operation into a $340 million enterprise over 15 years. And who did it so quietly that the founder's son genuinely had no idea that the woman he just fired in front of 200 people was actually the majority shareholder. Brandon learned this lesson the hard way. At an emergency board meeting he definitely wasn't prepared for. Let's untangle this. Rebecca Torres met David Kellerman in 2009 at a manufacturing trade show in Cleveland. She was 28, working as a production manager. He was 52, recently laid off, trying to start his own company making precision components for medical devices. By the end of their conversation, David said, "I'm looking for a partner. Someone who knows production inside and out." Rebecca had $40,000 in savings. It was everything she had. David was putting in $60,000. They shook hands, became 60 to 40 partners. Apex Manufacturing was born. The first 2 years were brutal. 16-hour days, weekends, holidays. David handled sales. Rebecca ran production, managed quality, handled certifications. They landed their first major contract in 2011. A medical device company needed precision machined components. $2 million deal. Rebecca retooled their entire production line, hit every deadline, passed every quality inspection. The client was so impressed they signed a 3-year extension worth $8 million. Apex grew. By 2014, they were doing $30 million in annual revenue. And that's when David made a decision that would change everything. He called Rebecca into his office on a Tuesday. He looked tired. "Rebecca, I went to the doctor last week. They found something, cancer. Stage 3, pancreatic. 12 to 18 months maybe. I need to get my affairs in order. And that includes the company." He slid a document across the desk. "I want you to buy me out." Rebecca stared at it. "David, I can't afford. Over time, we can structure it as a buyout agreement. You'll purchase my 60% stake over 10 years. Payments come out of company profits. If I die before the term is up, the remaining balance is forgiven, and the shares transfer to you automatically." "Why?" "Because you built this company as much as I did. Because my son Brandon has no interest in manufacturing and no ability to run a business. Because I trust you." Rebecca signed it. David died 16 months later, in early 2016. The remaining 35% of his shares transferred to Rebecca immediately. The other 25% went to his wife Margaret through the estate. Rebecca now owned 60% of Apex Manufacturing. Margaret owned 25%. The remaining 15% was distributed among early investors. But nobody really talked about it. Rebecca didn't announce it, didn't make a big deal of it, just kept working. She honored David's memory by doing exactly what he trusted her to do: grow the company, take care of people, deliver quality. By 2024, they'd hit $340 million in revenue. They had 400 employees across 2 facilities. Rebecca still kept a low profile. She didn't have a fancy office, didn't drive a luxury car. She wore steel-toed boots and safety glasses and walked the production floor every single day. Most employees knew her as Rebecca from production. The woman who'd been there forever. The one who remembered everyone's names. Very few knew she was the majority owner. And Brandon Kellerman, who'd grown up hearing stories about his dad's company but had never actually worked there until recently, definitely didn't know. Brandon had spent his 20s bouncing between startups, getting an MBA, doing a stint at a consulting firm. When David died in 2016, Brandon was 23 and had zero interest in manufacturing. But by 2022, after a few failed ventures, he started asking his mother Margaret about getting involved with Apex. Margaret, who owned 25% and sat on the board, thought it was a great idea. She called Rebecca. Said Brandon wanted to learn the business. Rebecca, who had loved David and respected Margaret, said yes. Brandon came in as a business development associate in early 2023. He lasted 3 months before complaining that he was overqualified. Rebecca moved him to project manager. He spent most of his time redoing org charts and talking about disruption without actually understanding what the company did. But he was David's son, and Margaret was proud, so Rebecca tolerated it. Then Margaret started pushing for Brandon to be promoted to executive leadership. She owned 25% of the company. She had board influence. In February 2024, Brandon was promoted to chief operating officer. He'd been at the company less than 2 years. Had never managed a P&L, had never overseen production. But he had the title, the corner office, and the ego to match. He brought in consultants to assess operational efficiency. Guys he knew from business school who never worked in manufacturing. He talked about outsourcing production. Never mind that Apex's reputation was built on quality. He pushed for headcount reductions in engineering while expanding business development with his friends. Rebecca pushed back where she could. But Brandon was becoming a problem. And then came the promotion party. Margaret insisted on celebrating Brandon's coup promotion. She rented the rooftop venue, invited executives, clients, investors. Rebecca attended because it would have been conspicuous not to. She stayed in the background. And that's when Brandon, emboldened by champagne and his new title, decided to fire the quiet woman from production who he saw as a relic of his father's old-fashioned way of doing business. He announced it publicly, at his own party. In front of witnesses. Rebecca went home that night and called her lawyer. Then she called the board secretary and requested an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. Then she called Margaret. Margaret, it's Rebecca. I need to talk to you about what happened tonight. She explained what Brandon had done, calmly, factually. Long silence. Then Margaret said quietly, Rebecca, I am so sorry. I'll talk to him. Margaret, talking to him isn't going to fix this. He fired me publicly at a company event. I've called an emergency board meeting for Monday at 9 a.m. Rebecca, please don't fire him. He's my son. We'll discuss it at the board meeting. Monday morning arrived. Rebecca was in the conference room at 8:45, so was the corporate attorney, so was the board secretary. The board members filed in, Margaret, 2 outside investors. The CFO. Brandon walked in at 9:02, coffee in hand, looking annoyed. Why are we doing this on a Monday morning? I've got meetings. Rebecca waited until everyone was seated. Thank you all for coming. This meeting has been called to address a significant incident that occurred Friday evening. Brandon rolled his eyes. If this is about Rebecca, I already told you. I'm not finished. Her voice wasn't loud. But it had steel in it. The room went quiet. On Friday evening, Brandon publicly terminated my employment. In front of clients, investors, and employees. Without consulting HR, without documented cause, and without board approval. The CFO shifted uncomfortably. One of the investors frowned. Now, normally, this would be an HR matter. But before we get into that, I think there's some context the board needs to understand. She opened her folder. Pulled out a document. Slid copies across the table. This is the current cap table for Apex Manufacturing. As you can see, I own 61% of the company's outstanding shares. Brandon picked up the paper, stared at it. What? I purchased your father's controlling stake through a buyout agreement executed in 2014. Upon his death, the remaining shares transferred to me. I am the majority shareholder of this company. Dead silence. Which means, Brandon, you don't have the authority to fire me, because I own the company. But you did create a significant legal and operational problem by attempting to do so. Brandon's face went from confused to pale to red. That's not Mom, did you know about this? Margaret nodded slowly. Your father set it up before he died. He wanted Rebecca to have control. And you didn't tell me? It wasn't relevant until now. Brandon turned to Rebecca. This is insane. You're on the production floor. You don't even have an executive title. I'm the owner. I don't need a title. So what, you've been pretending to be some low-level employee? I've been doing my job. The job your father and I built this company on. Production, quality, operations, the work that actually matters. Brandon stood up. This is ridiculous. I'm the Q. By a board vote that I abstained from out of respect for your mother. But let me be very clear. As majority shareholder, I can call for a vote to remove you from your position right now. The corporate attorney leaned forward. Rebecca, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. Brandon made this public when he fired me in front of 200 people. We're addressing it in front of this board. She turned back to Brandon. You have spent the last year pushing initiatives that undermine everything this company stands for. You've tried to outsource production, cut corners on quality, and eliminate the people who actually know how to do the work. You did all of this because you wanted to prove you were in charge. But you were never in charge. Your father trusted me to protect this company, and I have. From bad clients, from economic downturns, from competition. And now, from you. Brandon was shaking. You can't do this. I can, and I am. The board will now vote on your removal from the position of Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately. Margaret closed her eyes. Rebecca, please. Margaret, I loved your husband. I have nothing but respect for you. But your son just proved he's not capable of this role. The vote was called. Rebecca voted yes. The two outside investors voted yes. The CFO voted yes. Margaret abstained, tears in her eyes. 4-0, with one abstention. Brandon Kellerman was removed as Q. He stood up, knocking his chair back. This isn't over. I'll sue. You'll do nothing. The corporate attorney said quietly. Because you were terminated for cause after attempting to illegally fire the majority shareholder. If you pursue legal action, the company will countersue. I'd strongly advise against it. Brandon looked around the room. No one met his eyes. He walked out. Rebecca formally accepted the title of CEO, appointed a new Q from within the operations team. Margaret approached her afterward. I'm sorry. I didn't know he'd do that. I know. He's my son. I just wanted him to have something. He can have something. Just not this. They worked out a buyout agreement over the next 2 months. Rebecca purchased Margaret's 25% stake, bringing her total ownership to 86%. Brandon never returned to the company. Word spread quickly about what had happened. It became a cautionary tale in business circles. A reminder to check the cap table before making power moves. Rebecca reorganized the executive team, promoted from within. By the end of 2024, Apex hit $390 million in revenue. Rebecca finally moved into the CEO office. But she still walked the production floor every morning. And when new employees asked how long she'd been with the company, she always said the same thing. Since the beginning. Let's talk about what actually happened here. This is about the difference between titles and ownership. Between proximity to power and actual power. Brandon thought that being the founder's son, having an MBA, and getting promoted to Q made him powerful. But power in a company comes from ownership and from the trust of the people who actually do the work. Rebecca had both. And she'd earned both. Brandon never understood that. He thought the company was his birthright, that his last name meant something. But your last name doesn't mean anything if you haven't earned the respect that comes with it. And firing the majority shareholder at your own promotion party? That's not a power move. That's a career-ending mistake. Alright, Tangled Yarns family, your turn. Have you ever worked somewhere where the owner was so low-key that people didn't realize who they were? What happened when someone tried to pull rank on them? Drop your stories below. I want to hear about the moments when someone learned the org chart the hard way. If this story gave you satisfaction, smash that like button. Subscribe for new stories every single day. And remember, before you fire someone, maybe check who actually owns the company. I'm Brett. This is Tangled Yarns. And that yarn? Officially untangled. See you tomorrow.